looked forward to the service tonight now for many weeks. A young lady by the name of Dawn Thomas, whom I've never met before in my life, and I don't even know if she's here tonight. Is she here tonight? Is she? Dawn, it's nice to meet you now for the first time. We had spoken by phone. She introduced me to Carol Everett by tape. She gave me a tape of Carol's testimony, and I got excited about it and decided that I would like to have Carol Everett come and be a part of our service on this Sunday night and share her personal experience in coming to know Jesus Christ. It's a moving testimony. And I told Carol I'm not going to give a lot of introductory remarks about her, frankly, because I don't know much about her. But secondly, in her testimony, she'll be telling you about herself. And so I will allow her to introduce herself to you by way of testimony. I will say this, Carol Everett now is with the Dallas Right to Life organization. It's a very fine pro-life group. And she travels around the country, giving her own experience, sharing her testimony, and taking a strong stand for life. And so, Carol Everett, it's wonderful to have you in the Far Hills Baptist Church tonight, and we'll turn the service now over to you to share as God lays His message on your heart.
Thank you. I'm here tonight because I'm that victim of abortion that you don't hear much about. I'm a mother who decided to destroy her child's life before it had a chance to live. My story actually begins in 1973, in January, when abortion was legalized in our nation. Oh, I was married, and I had an 8-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son, and we had good jobs, and everything was going along smoothly. And abortion was suddenly legal. And it was very much in the news. Every magazine you picked up, every newspaper, and of course television and radio were just heralding this marvelous new thing that women had this right to choose to do. We could now choose abortion as an option. It was now considered a method of birth control even. And 2 weeks later, I found myself pregnant. And with very little thought to it, we chose abortion. You see, it was supposed to be as easy as going in and having a period. I mean, it was just so simple, no after effects, no problems. Everybody needed to choose abortion if it wasn't convenient to be pregnant. And it wasn't convenient for my husband and I to have a baby at that time. And so, expecting to be sent to New Mexico, New York, or California because abortion wasn't legal in Texas yet, I called my doctor and said, we don't want this baby. Where do we go? And he said, you don't go anywhere. You bring your husband's urine in. No man has ever been found to be pregnant yet. The pregnancy test will be negative, and we'll do the abortion right here in the hospital. And that's what we did. My husband went with me, gave his urine sample, the pregnancy test was negative, and the next morning as I awoke from that procedure, then I knew I'd made a mistake. You see, I was depressed. When a woman knows she's pregnant, no matter how bad the news is, we get a little excited. It's neat that we can conceive that our body can really give life. And when you take that away, you know that too. But it's much worse than that because you see, the thoughts you think are, that baby's gone. I killed my baby. What kind of person must I be if I killed my baby? And you suppress it because you see, you don't call your mother and say, I just had an abortion, I just killed my baby and I'm depressed. You don't call your best friend and say, I'm dying inside because I just killed my baby. So you suppress it. And as I went home, I was very angry at my husband for his part in this abortion. You see, I perceived that it was his fault, not mine. And so rather than verbalizing that anger, I acted it out. I started having an affair. And that had not been a pattern of mine in the past at all. But, of course, that acted out that anger very vividly, and, of course, very quickly we were separated. And that didn't take care of it either. There was still more of a problem. So I started just getting drunk one day a month. And here I am, the mother of 2 children, who just suddenly starts coming home one day a month drunk. What do you think that did to my children? And that didn't take care of it either. So I went to a doctor and said, you know, I am so depressed. And he knew nothing about post-abortion syndrome, and he equated it to the divorce. And so he prescribed some mood elevators that were so strong that you took them at night when you went to bed. You did not wake up all night. You had to drag yourself out of bed in the morning and kind of went through the next day in a fog. And because I was involved in the medical profession, it was easy for me to go to doctor to doctor to doctor and get more of this marvelous drug, so I could just be oblivious to the whole world all the time. And what I was doing was actually abusing a prescription drug. Now, if you haven't picked up on what I'm describing to you, I'm describing to you literally a life that was going along smoothly. I had the abortion, and the bottom fell out. The baby was gone. The baby was dead. The bottom fell out of my life, my husband's life, and the 2 children we had. I submit to you that if we have just killed 22.5 million babies in this United States, as the abortionists tell us we have maimed, sure the babies are gone on to be with the Lord. But here we've maimed the mothers, the fathers, and the siblings born or yet to be born. And we have literally touched every family in our nation with abortion now. Think about it in your own family. Has abortion touched you somewhere that you don't even know about? You see, women cannot share when they've done this. It's just too bad we can't tell the world. But let's go back to my story. And here I was, 2 kids, now on the way to a divorce, and I needed to do something. So I did what I called got hold of my life, and I literally changed everything I could. Now, it's no reflection on anybody who has on yellow. Please don't think that. But I had never really liked the color yellow. But I suddenly perceived yellow to be the thing that would make me happy in life. So I went out and bought all yellow clothes. I redecorated the house in yellow. I bought a yellow car. And you've got it. Yellow didn't make me happy either. But I finally found something that would make me happy. I started to work for a man who came to own 4 abortion clinics. And as I started selling abortion procedures, I found something that made me feel all right. You see, each time I sold another abortion, it justified the one I'd had. So I was very good at it. And he put me in one of his clinics there in Dallas, and they were doing about 185 abortions a month. And with just a few marketing changes, very quickly I changed that, and he was up over 400 abortions a month. So he sent me to his Fort Worth clinic 30 miles away. And we did the same thing there. We went from 200 abortions a month to over 400. And the last month I was there, he did 823 abortions. And I would probably still be there, but something else set in. You see, when I'd become involved in the abortion clinics themselves, I was concentrating on the woman, all the time the woman, and how this abortion would help her. You see, I'd become pregnant when I was 16 and had a baby, have a beautiful 25-year-old son today, thank heaven. But how different could my life have been if abortion had been legal there? I shudder to think. And then my sister had become pregnant when she was 14. She had had that baby and given it up for adoption. She was later killed in an accident. And my mother still to this day wonders if that girl will go far enough when she finds out that her mother's no longer alive. Will she still find us? So I could use all of those things to sell abortions. I could tell people how great it would have been if we had had that option to choose abortion. But as I watched the man I worked for go from $25,000 a year to $125,000 a year in these 2 clinics, I wanted part of that money. So I marched into his office and said, you know, I have more than doubled your business. I want an equity interest. He politely said no. I marched out, and I placed my Yellow Page advertising for my own abortion clinics, which would open in 6 months when the Yellow Pages came out for publication. And the first month we did 45 abortions, 65, 85, and the last month I was there, with 2 clinics open, we did 545 abortions. And you say, how do you remember those numbers? Well, when you're paid by the abortion, I made $25 per abortion. You remember how many abortions you did. You see, that last month when we did 545 abortions, that means I took home $13,625 that month. The abortion industry is the largest uncontrolled industry in our nation, and it runs on one thing, money. The abortionists 5 years ago took home $50 to $375 per case, and of course it's much more than that now. If they own their own clinic, they take home roughly half or a third of the fee that they charge for the abortion. Now, I had bigger plans than this. You see, this wasn't enough. We were on target for me to make $250,000, $260,000 in 1983, but I wanted to open 3 more clinics. And when we got our total of 5 abortion clinics open, I would be making $1 million a year, and this was my new goal. Now, if I look back now, my life really wasn't worth very much. You see, I worked 7 days a week. I literally answered the telephone 24 hours a day from my home. If somebody wanted to book an abortion at 2 o'clock in the morning, they could do it. All they had to do was call, and they still do that. And clinics were most profitable on Sunday. You see, no one really wanted anyone to know on Sunday. They came in. We literally could do abortions with half the staff we could during the rest of the week because the people on Sunday were so quiet. They were really running from something. But here I was, literally, I want you to know, my son who was in college called me one day, and I realized that he was reading me the paper long distance from Austin, Texas, and I said, what are you doing, honey? And he said, you know, you never take the time to read the newspaper, and I'm reading you the newspaper so you know what's going on in the world. And I thought, oh. But that didn't stop me either. I kept right on. The $1 million was the goal. But what we don't think about abortion clinics and call them is that's Satan's stronghold, one of his real strongholds on our nation. And where Satan is, it's pretty chaotic. The nurses fight, the doctors fight, and as you might imagine, the partners fight. We had a marvelous relationship. It was the doctor, his live-in girlfriend, and myself. And I don't have to tell you which one I couldn't get along with. That live-in girlfriend and I could not stand in the same room without sparks flying. I mean, literally, we looked at each other, and it was just chaotic. I mean, bombs went off. So I needed to get this straight. I went to our financial advisor and said, if we're going to open 3 more clinics, we need to get these problems straight. And so he called in a man he introduced to us as a business counselor, who sat down with each of us individually and brought us back together for a 4th hour. And in this 4th hour, he handed us a piece of paper with 6 points on it, and all 6 of these points were in my favor. They literally told her to get out of the clinic, to write, not call, if she needed anything. And I thought, gosh, I'd have paid you $75 an hour. Where in the world have you been? But we had to agree to meet with him for 4 more weeks, an hour each. I thought I'd won. I thought I'd manipulated this man. And as I sat down with him the second time, I couldn't manipulate him. And I started noticing something about him that wasn't in my world. He had a piece about him that I could not describe. And for some strange reason I'll never know, I finally looked him in the eye and said, are you a preacher? And he said, yes. And I said, what in the world are you doing in this situation? He said, God sent me. You really have to know him to appreciate some of this imitating, and I understand. He said, God sent him. Now, I fell off my chair. I said, I am a Christian. I want you to know I have a Bible in my desk drawer. I tithe on all this abortion money. I pray every day that we'll have a good day, there'll be no complications, and God doesn't talk to people. Well, as you might imagine, after much discussion and much prayer, he convinced me that not only he, but he and his elders felt that they had indeed been called into this situation. He was even so bold as to tell me that God had told them there was someone in this situation that they wanted out, that God wanted out, and had given them a 30-day limit to be involved. And I thought, this guy is crazy. I mean, he's nuts. But we prayed a prayer of salvation. We asked Jesus Christ to come into my life as Lord and Savior. And then I went back in the abortion clinic, never expecting anything to change. You've got to remember, I thought I was a Christian. I thought I was helping women. I thought, really, even though I didn't have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, that I was helping women because he wanted me to. The deception is always there. But as I went back in that abortion clinic, I saw things very differently. You see, I saw women were not running in the front door saying, I'm so excited, I've been working so hard to get pregnant so I could rush in here and have my abortion. These women were looking for one person to tell them they didn't have to have an abortion. These women were hurting. The abortion clinic was the last place they wanted to be. And I couldn't believe it. I thought everybody wanted an abortion. And for the first time in my life, I started counseling women not to have abortions, and this was costing me money. I mean, $25 a case, every one I sent out that front door. So I went back to the preacher the next week, and I said, you will not believe what has just started happening. These women don't all want abortions. And he said, Cheryl, it hasn't just started happening. Your eyes have been opened. And I knew he was right. Somehow, deep inside, I knew he was right. And I went back in that abortion clinic, but this time I went in telling him I was leaving. And of course, the first thing they hit me with was, how will you keep 2 kids in college with $1,000 a month allowance? How will you keep their car payments up? How will you keep your house payments? Money, money, money. And that's where my heart was. And I didn't know. And so in confusion, I fell to my knees, literally inside that abortion clinic. And my prayer at this time was, Lord, if there is a Lord, if this is not where you want me, hit me over the head with a 2x4. I am the queen of the weird prayer. There are 2 things I do not ask anyone to pray, or 2x4s or patience. I pray them both, and the world will do okay without you praying that to the Lord. He will do okay too. But my 2x4 was very swift. Channel 4, a television station in the Dallas area, did an expose on abortion clinics doing abortions on women who were not pregnant. And they sent 6 women into our clinic wired for sound, looking very young, very innocent, in blue jeans, so we could easily deceive them, I suppose, into having an abortion. We worked so hard on this star reporter that she had to change her tape. We kept her for 2 hours convincing her she was pregnant. She was so convinced she was pregnant when she left our clinic, she went directly to her doctor, who said, no, you are not pregnant. And we had just tried to do an abortion on her. And as this flashed across the news screen for 5 days, I did not understand that peace that does surpass all understanding, but I did know that that was my answer to prayer. And I walked out of the abortion clinic, never to return. And then I did start a personal relationship at that time with Jesus Christ. And he started to teach me all about how to trust him. My wilderness was a real interesting experience because, you see, I went from a lot of money to no money, and he had to literally supply my every need. And it was incredible, and if I told you about that, you would probably even be amazed. But they would be threatening to turn off the electricity in my business, and I finally learned to trust a little bit. And someone would walk in 30 minutes before they were going to turn it off and say, I hear you need $971. And I would say yes. And they would write a check. And these were my new Christian friends, not my old Christian friends. These were God's people that he used to teach me that he would take care of me and the children. And then about 6 months after I left the abortion business, I found the 139th Psalm. And it was then that I knew that I'd been involved in the death of over 35,000 babies. And it was then, as only our Lord can, that we started working through the forgiveness and the understanding. And step by step, and girl by girl, we worked through it. And then, you know, what really happened was God started to talk to me. Oh, not in an audible voice, but I started having these thoughts that said, Carol, you ought to tell people what you know about the inside of the abortion clinic. And I agreed to do that, and I didn't have any problem with that. But you see, I was still making deals with the Lord. I was saying, okay, Lord, I'll talk about the inside of an abortion clinic, but I don't want to talk about this abortion. I don't want anyone to know that I had an abortion. You see, it's still too bad for anyone to talk about. We can't stand up and say we killed our own baby. And then one night, my church was working through, as you may have, everybody was learning to do a 5-minute testimony. And it came time for the E's, and guess what? It was Carol Everett's time to give her testimony. And I do this all over the world, right? I mean, no problem. You don't have to rehearse this, Carol. You can do yours in 5 minutes. But as I stood up there, do you know what came out of my mouth? I had an abortion in 1973, February. And I couldn't believe I said it. And the church couldn't believe I said it. And we were all crying. It was incredible. But then the Lord started to show me how he could forgive me for even that, and how he loved me. And I went through a grieving process that lasted for 5 months. You see, maybe God could forgive me, but I had actually taken the life of my baby, which I perceived to be a boy. And I couldn't forgive myself. And I cried, and I cried, and I cried. And then I knew I had to tell my other 2 children. And this was a year ago in March, so they were then, 22 and 24. And I couldn't tell them. And finally I told them. And that helped. The crying at least stopped. And then we started working through their emotions and how they felt about the fact that I had taken their brother. And then I went to my ex-husband and said, you know, I had an abortion. We had a part in this together, and let's work through it. Now, I'm not going to tell you that that's a miraculous story and that we're back together and that everything's rosy. I will tell you that he's been in counseling for the last 1.5 years, and that he's working through this as I am. And about the only thing I can say is I'm just believing God to put that relationship back together, because I know I can't. So we're still on the road. We're still working through it. It's not over. But what I hope I can do is tell you a little bit more about what happens inside an abortion clinic, so when you leave here tonight that you have a little better insight to what abortion has really done to us as a nation. We're going to take a quick walk through an abortion clinic. How many of you have seen a sign somewhere that says problem pregnancy, abortion question mark, or pregnant question mark? Somewhere you thought you could get information about a problem pregnancy. How many of you have seen that right here? You have 3 clinics here, quite a few. Okay, when a girl perhaps has sex for the first time, perhaps she's 2 weeks late, perhaps she's 1 day late, maybe she couldn't even possibly know that she's pregnant. But she needs some information about this possible pregnancy, so she calls this number. Now, the telephone on the other end is answered by an abortion counselor. This abortion counselor sells one product, abortion. She doesn't sell or make any money if you continue that pregnancy in any way. She's interested in doing one thing, your pregnancy terminating abortion. That's her only interest. She would start anywhere else in Dallas 5 years ago at $4.50 an hour. However, in the abortion clinic, she could start at $6 an hour. And if she's very good, meaning her percentages of completions, and they keep very accurate statistics on how many times she answered the phone, how many were abortion appointments, how many actually showed, how many were no-shows, how many were not pregnant, how many were too big. If she has an 85% or greater completion rate, then within 6 months she can be making $12 an hour. And yesterday I understand that a nurse working in an abortion clinic in Dayton, Ohio, can start at $12.50 an hour with 3 weeks paid vacation. And I don't know what your other rates of pay are, but that's pretty good, just to start with 3 weeks of vacation right out. They are literally paying them to look the other way. So this telephone counselor answers the phone, and the girl says, I think I'm pregnant. And the counselor says, what's the first day of your last normal period? Well, the girl didn't know they were going to ask this, so she has to look. She comes back, counselor's patient. I mean, this is part of the sales technique. And she said, gives her a date, and the counselor says, you're 8 weeks pregnant. She has just planted the first seed in a long marketing thread that runs through the entire presentation. And after all, this woman on the other end of the line is the expert on problem pregnancies. This girl knows nothing about pregnancy. And then the question, is this good news or bad news? Well, the good news people call their obstetricians. We know it's bad news. And so she answers, it's bad news. Don't worry, we can take care of it. We're the answer to your problem. Whatever it is, we can take care of it. And then she starts searching. She has to find what the problem is. You know, you don't have to have your parents' consent to have an abortion. Well, that may not be it. So she goes on, you know, we can do it on your lunch hour. Your boss doesn't have to know. And as soon as they find the fear to reinforce this decision with, she stops looking. And then the next question is, does the father know? They never call the mother a mother. They never call the baby a baby. They call the young man the father. What they're saying is, put all your anger, all your guilt, all your frustration over on him. It's all his fault. He can handle it. That's why these relationships self-destruct within a maximum of 90 days after the abortion procedure. And then she goes on. She has 2 more problems now. She has to get her thinking about money, and she has to get her in the clinic, one way or the other. And so if the girl doesn't ask about money, if she's just sitting there kind of in a daze, the counselor moves her through. You know, it's $300. Do you have $300? Well, no. Well, can you borrow $300? Well, no. And she goes on through this whole line. First, the girl's going to be hysterical when she says $300, but the counselor's job is to calm her down and get her thinking how she can come up with $300. And she'll probably tell her to go to all her friends, get $5, $10, $25, get a job, pay them back in a year. It is only the Lord's grace that I cannot remember how many of those abortions were paid for literally in pennies. You know, if they're really doing it to help the woman, why don't they give them away? Why don't they do the free ones now and then? They get every last cent up front before the abortion procedure. You don't pay when you walk out after you've had it. I mean, you might walk it, right? You pay before the abortion. Now the only problem is to get her in the clinic. And if she can't make an abortion appointment on the telephone, then what she's going to do is get her in for this. Here is the $5 pregnancy test. In Texas, it's free. And so she gets her in for the pregnancy test just to see if you're pregnant. And she books a time that she knows they'll be doing pregnancy tests. And in Texas, what they do is give them an offer of 2 times because the counselor has her own appointment visit. And she brings her in at 4 o'clock, and she knows that Linda's going to be walking through the door at 4 o'clock. So she greets her at the door. Hi, Linda, I'm Cheryl. I am so glad you're here. And she hugs her, and Linda thinks, my goodness, am I the only person she's working with? She must really care about me. And they go back to do the pregnancy test, and she lets Linda watch. They mix the urine and the chemicals, and she points to a chart on the wall and says, this is positive, this is negative. That's a pretty good sales technique. And they watch the test. Now, if you do a lot of pregnancy tests, you know at about a minute if it's going to be positive or not. And if it's going to be positive, then she just lets Linda watch, and she points to the positive, and maybe they'll cry for a moment, and then she'll say, you have your money, do you want to do it today? And back up front. But what if it's negative? Well, at about a minute, you can tell if it's not turning positive. So then the counselor starts another sales technique, and this is to sell the next test. You know, you may be too early for this test to actually show. This is not as sensitive as some of our other tests, which cost $15, $20, or sonogram can be from $25 to $50. But we can do this other test, and you won't have to worry about it anymore. You can walk out of here and not know and be worried about it forever, but you can also walk out of here knowing that you're not pregnant. So they sell the next test, and in the Texas area what they do is they take them back and do the sonogram. Well, a sonogram looks into your stomach to see if you're pregnant. And your uterus will show up regardless of pregnant or not. It will show up today. If we did a sonogram on everybody in here, we would see something. So they have her fill her bladder, drink a lot of water, fill her bladder, and that uterus will pop right up there. But a full uterus just about to start a period will really be dark. So they get a really good shot, and they lock it on the sonogram, and they flip the screen around, and they say, see there, Linda, there it is. You're pregnant. Well, how many of you read sonograms every day? Linda doesn't read sonograms every day, and she looks at this, and she does see some definition. She sees something, and she says, yes, I must be pregnant. They're saying that's pregnant. And so the next question is, do you have your money? Do you want to do it today? And they take her up front. Let's talk just briefly how they do an abortion on a woman that's not pregnant. You know, when you're pregnant, your uterus is a muscle, and it's a tight, hard little muscle when it's not pregnant. It gets soft when it's pregnant. It's very difficult to dilate a non-pregnant uterus, so the chances of injuring the cervix, the mouth, the womb, are much greater. Perhaps that cervix will never clamp down normally on another pregnancy again, because maybe they break through it and injure it. But then the second thing is the doctor gets in there, and he has to prove to everyone in the room that he did an abortion. I mean, he has to prove to the nurse and to the counselor. They're not going to show the girl, but he has other people. And so he scrapes out more of the lining of the uterus. So the chances for sterility are far greater in that woman who is not actually pregnant. But you say, oh, they're going to send it to the lab and it'll come back. That is $10. That cuts down on the profit margin. They put it down the garbage disposal, as they did 5 years ago, and there's no evidence. No one knows. Now, we are working on trying to prove, we don't know, but we believe that they're actually selling the tissue. Dr. Nathanson, the abortionist who has left the abortion industry and is now a very strong pro-life spokesman, says they are even selling the skin and the organs for experimentation and for all sorts of things. The skin for burn victims. It's terrible. But let's go back up where the girls paid. Cash, first of all, MasterCard, American Express, or Visa. Now, you might check. Some states have been very instrumental. For instance, Arkansas has literally stopped all bank card companies from charging abortion procedures on them. And you can step out and see what you can do with that. Find out if the credit cards you carry actually charge abortion procedures on them, and complain or stop it or send the card back, whatever you feel. You may wind up like I am with one credit card and telling everybody you can't use that one because they charge abortion procedures. Then they go into a holding room, and in the reception area for the counseling, they go in very quickly. They take them in and give them a counseling form that's 2, 6, or 12 pages long. It doesn't matter which one the clinic is using. They were all written by a National Abortion Federation attorney, written with one thing in mind, to so confuse the woman that's reading this form that she won't ask any questions. But they all have 2 questions, and the first one is it a baby? And they say, no, it's a product of conception, it's a blood clot, it's a piece of tissue. How many women do you think would actually have abortions if they said, well, it's about 6 weeks. It's about this long, and it has arms and legs and hands and feet and little eyes that are closed like little puppies and kitties when they're born. But, no, it's nothing. I am a product of conception. Nothing was added to me from that moment, and by the time a woman knows she's pregnant, that baby's organs are even formed. Its heart starts beating at 18 days, and by the time she's missed her second period, every organ is perfectly intact, and the brain waves are present. And they tell them it's not a baby. And the second question is, does it hurt? And here again, they go a little crazy and tell them a long story. They get their hand up like this and say, your uterus is a muscle. It's a cramp to open it, it's a cramp to close it, and they slowly dilate it with dilators slowly increasing in size, and they start doing this. And you look down, and the girl's doing this too, to see if that hurts. That is not what an abortion feels like. They tell them it's a slight cramping sensation. Every woman in here has had cramps. An abortion is excruciatingly painful. Many of these women have never had a pelvic examination, and yet they are subjected to doctors they don't know who are rushing so they can do 6 to 8 abortions an hour or more, who run in, roughly do the abortion and leave. How much empathy do they have in that room? Very little. It doesn't matter. It's a very, very painful and psychologically painful because of the sound. And so now she signs her form. She's paid her money. She's signed her form. She's in a different waiting area now. She's in the procedure waiting area. In there, there's a pecking order. You're next, and I'm after you. And there's a rhythm, depending on how many doctors are working. If they're working, say, 3, as we did on a Saturday, it moves very quickly. And they take them back, and they put them in this room. Now, in the procedure area, it's very different. They're working for the doctor back here. So it's very cold. They put her in a room, and they strap her on the table. Strap her legs on the table. I never understood why more of those girls didn't understand that there was a problem, or they wouldn't have to strap them on the table. But if they're working, say, 4 rooms on a Saturday, they'll have a radio in each room. And they're all on a different station. That's so there won't be any cross-communication. But again, think of the chaos when you can hear 4 radios loudly blaring on different channels, different stations. And all these people are running around, this is business, and they're getting them in, getting them out. Every time they make a doctor wait, they're losing money, so they have to be careful. The doctor comes by, picks up the chart, and there's a little receipt on the chart. He takes this and puts it in his scrub suit pocket. You see, this is how he pays. At the end of the day, he takes up the number of receipts and says, these are the ones I did. They count it out, and then they count out the cash. They give him cash at the end of the day. This way, they do not have to show him to be a clinic employee, so they don't have to pay for his astronomical malpractice insurance, which starts at about $50,000. They do not have to keep any records for IRS. And the reason the doctors like to work in the clinic is because it's cash. I've seen 3 doctors split $4,500 for 3 hours of work on a Saturday 5 years ago. It's much more than that now. But he has no overhead. He doesn't have to wait for the insurance to pay. That's cash that day. That's why they have no problem getting doctors. And the doctor walks in and he pats her on the leg or something and says, hi, babe, hi, dear. Some term of endearment. He doesn't want to identify with her really as a person. And rather than saying, have you thought about this? Is this really what you want to do? Are you sure you want to have an abortion? Oh, no, he doesn't say that. He says, who does your mother think you are today? Are you supposed to be at some park? Are you supposed to be at Six Flags? He's looking for the fear, and literally she sinks into that table. And if he didn't touch it, the counselor, the one that booked the procedure on the telephone, is usually in there with her. Oh, she tells her she's there to help her. I mean, after all, we're your buddy, we're your friend. But she's really there to keep her quiet. You don't want her screaming, so any of the other patients here are screaming. It's terrible if one starts screaming, they scream the rest of the day. And so then the counselor will supply the doctor with the reason the girl's there, and then they go to work. And many times, because of the circumstances, because these girls are so scared, they will say, stop, I don't want to do this. I've changed my mind. And even though it's not too late, many times they only have just started. The doctor will say, sorry, too late. After all, she's paid her money, she signed her counseling form. He wants his part of that money now. And then if she jumps or jerks, he'll say, if you do that again, I'll tear your uterus and it'll be your fault. You've got to be still. And she's very still after that because she's scared. And she cries. And then the sounds in the procedure room are horrible because the machine that they use, the suction machine, is and does sound very much like a vacuum cleaner, and it can be up to 75 times stronger. And just think of the blood in the tissue as it pops through that tube and the sounds this poor girl has to take with her the rest of her life. And then it's over and she goes to the recovery room. And in there are 2 different reactions. The first one is, I've killed my baby. Now, as bad as that sounds, that's probably the healthy reaction. You see, that girl has an opportunity to grieve for what she's done, go from there, understand it, and go on with her life. I have yet to meet a healed post-abortive woman who has not confessed Jesus Christ as her Lord and Savior. It's the only thing I've ever seen that everybody says Christ is the only answer to really getting through. And then the second one is the one that's just as I was, who's running. He says, I've been here 4 hours. You told me I'd only be here 2. Let me go. Let me out of here. But they can't go. I mean, you've got to stay for the resale process. This is important. I mean, we want to put you on contraceptives. We want to help you get on some method of birth control so you won't come back here again. And maybe the girl will say, I am never going to do this again. This is it. And they'll get right in her face and say, honey, you came in here one time. You'll be back. Now, you take these birth control pills. You don't want to get pregnant again. Now, you read this 2-page form. You sign it, and it tells you how to take the pills, and you give it back to us. So we have it in our chart to protect ourselves. How much of that do you think those girls really understand? Very little. They're so upset. And so they shove these birth control pills down their face. And after all, these are the experts, and they're saying, take these pills so you won't come back. And even though Planned Parenthood statistics say where contraceptives are given out, the birth control, the pregnancy rate goes up instantly. And 25% of these girls do return. Oh, I'm not sure if it's not just to see if they can't get pregnant again, hoping perhaps to continue that pregnancy in some way, or if it is the fact that the contraceptives have failed, that they come back. I mean, after all, we're their buddies, we're their friends. The most I ever saw a woman have was 9 abortions. She came in, and she was so hardened to it, she said, give me the consent form. She signed the consent form. She said, here's the money. Get it over with. As bad as all that sounds, abortion is terrible. It's much worse than you could ever imagine. I could go on and on and on. But we haven't even talked about the bad part. Out of those abortions we did, we were maiming or killing 1 woman out of every 500. Once a month, we were putting a woman in my car. I mean, you go in an ambulance in front of an abortion clinic. That's terrible advertising. Put them in a car, transport them to a hospital that will take care of your doctor, not your patient. You're not thinking about her. You're thinking about him. You've got to protect his reputation. After all, you have this built-in cover-up because the family's feeling guilty. They are not going to come out and say, you know, I helped my daughter have an abortion. She died as a result of that. Mainly because they're dealing with their own grief. A year ago, actually today, a woman went in, it was on a Saturday, of course, in a Dallas abortion clinic, and she was very scared. She did not want to have an abortion. She had been told by one of the charity hospitals there in town that she had black spots on her uterus and she must have an abortion. She was 6 months pregnant. She kept asking for reassurance, and they finally said to her, give us your money and let us get this over with. She gave them the money, and 3 hours later she was on an operating table in Presbyterian Hospital there in Dallas. The doctor had perforated her uterus and pulled her bowel out through her vagina. Now, this girl was just fine, and 2 days later, the abortion clinic sent her some flowers to the hospital. Now, her mother got mad that they sent the flowers to the hospital. And rather than calling the press and telling the whole world, but thank heaven she did call us, she called the Dallas Right to Life. Now, I wasn't on staff at that time. But they called me and said, Carol, there's a girl in Presbyterian. Would you go over and see her? And so, with a little prompting from the Lord, I went by and picked up a Bible, not knowing what I was walking into, and went into that hospital room. And she was flopping all over this bed. She was crying, she was screaming, she was hurting. She was screaming, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. And you know, I haven't had a lot of training in this, but I have had evangelism explosion, and I do know sometimes I can present the gospel. And I'd prayed a lot before I went in there. And finally I said, where are you going if you die? And she broke down. And then I went through the gospel, and she accepted it. And you know, sometimes we forget the power in that gospel. I had walked in this room with this woman screaming and crying and flopping around in that bed, and suddenly she just became perfectly still. She stopped crying, and the peace of the Lord was just all over her face. She started laughing. She started talking to me. She became a person. And when I gave her that Bible, you would have thought I had given her the most important thing in her life. It was incredible. We were able to spend time with her. I actually took her home from the hospital, got to see the 9-month-old baby that she had, spent a lot of time with her. Through a lot of things that were going on, though, I could not do the thing that I the most in my world wanted to do. I wanted to call the press in. I wanted the press, I wanted the public to see what this woman and her family were going through. I wanted them to know. But you know, I couldn't do that to them. I couldn't inflict anything else on them at that time. They just couldn't handle it. Now, there's a good side to this one. It did result in a colostomy. It was the first time that I'd been on the right side to know what happens when a woman has a colostomy. This thing hung down to just above her knees. And I got to watch her as she dealt with that and learned how to use it. And it was an incredibly difficult experience for me because I'd seen a lot of women who had had colostomies as a result of abortions before. But this one was reversed in February of this year. And praise God, she's doing fine. And we do have a $4 million lawsuit against that abortionist and that clinic. And more of that needs to happen. But what we've got to do is, we as a church have a responsibility. You see, we need to get on our knees and see what the Lord would have us to do. It may be something just like praying for our nation and praying for godly leaders who will stand up and take the godly approach and the scriptural value system that we want to the nation's capital, to the city. And, of course, you've had a marvelous experience right here in town with Dennis Sheriff, standing up for his beliefs, and we need to do that. But it may be something like helping a post-aborted woman through her trauma. It may be something like praying for that woman and loving her and helping her. You see, many times they can't admit and won't admit, and we just need to pray for them and be there for them when they need that. It may be something like standing in the gap with a girl out in front of a clinic. There may be someone, you may need to go and minister to someone in front of a clinic. You may need to take her home. You may need to bring her into your home and let her live with you. Yesterday, and my grandmother by proxy, I suppose, I had a 25-year-old rape victim who's been living with me for the past few months. And yesterday morning before I left, she had a 6-pound, 1-ounce baby girl. So when I go home, I will not have a pregnant girl, I will have a baby in my home, and I'm very excited about that. But there are many, many things that we can do. But whatever we do, we have to do it because the Lord has called us to do it. We can't do it ourselves. We can't stop this horror because we really want to stop it. We do have a responsibility to vote and to vote for godly people, but we must seek the Lord's guidance on everything before we do it. Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure. And God bless you just for your position and for the fact that you have a minister who's not closed and is open to talking about abortion. I think that's marvelous coming from Texas. I just love to see that. And we thank you.
Thank you. It horrified me some time back when I was visiting in Jerusalem, Israel, and I had the occasion of going to the Museum of the Holocaust. A terrifying experience. And I wouldn't recommend it unless you've got a strong stomach. But what horrified me, I suppose, about it more than anything else was that Adolf Hitler was elected to power. The people chose him. And then they succumbed to his autocratic leadership. And soon after that, 6 million Jews were killed. Did you know that during that period of time, the evangelical church in Germany, which was the strongest religious influence, said nothing. Nothing. 22 million have been slaughtered, innocent, preborn children. And for too long, those of us who are part of the evangelical community have said nothing. I'm determined not to remain silent anymore. And I may not be able to do much, but I can at least speak and express my conviction and my outrage that as a nation of people, we have allowed this to happen. I agree with James Dobson. It is the number one social evil in America today. I think he's right. And I hope it changes. I hope with the election of Anthony Kennedy to the Supreme Court, and we're all crossing our fingers, aren't we, that when a test case comes before the Supreme Court, maybe there'll be sanity restored to this nation. And we'll see that infamous Roe versus Wade decision of 1973 reversed. And I do pray for godly leadership. I appreciate the challenge, Carol, to be wise as God's people when we go to the polls to vote. I'm not going to endorse candidates, but I'm sure going to endorse issues. And then let you choose those candidates as I choose those candidates that stand for the right issues. There's a lot we can do as evangelicals that we've not done in the past, either because of timidity or ignorance or for whatever reason. But we must, because of our responsibility to God and the fact that we are our brothers